Okay, whenever you're ready, give me a signal. Welcome to this electrifying segment of Let's Talk About Dave. Here's a guy that went from mama's boy to bag boy, to dining at Bob's big boy to Johnny's boy. So don't leave the house, don't touch your mouse, don't click your flipper, and stay tuned in, because Dave is just an all-around.
From New York, the greatest city in the world, it's The Late Show with Dave
Jim Becker.
I'd often visit the Comedy Store, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. Matter of fact, that's where we first met. And I'd stop in there, and Robin Williams would be over in the corner standing on his head, and Mitzi's little kid, Paulie, he'd be running around playing grab ass, just pestering all the comedians. And that night, Leno, he's over there arguing with the host about who goes on next. Well, you just got done with your thing. You were coming off stage, and I told a friend of mine, I said, that's Letterman. That's that dude from Indiana. I mean, that guy's great. He's also on a roll, because he just made $15, which is enough money to go to Bob's Big Boy and get him some dinner and get some gas for that truck. Mitzi was paying the comedians $15. They weren't real impressed with that pay scale. She's bringing in thousands of dollars an hour. She's selling more liquor than a bootlegger the day after the repeal of Prohibition, and the comedians knew that. But at the same time, she had the premier showcase for the new talent. And the scouts were in there quite often, and if you wanted to get discovered, you had to get in there and do your thing. And a few people, David Letterman especially, and a few others, figured that out early on. And look what happened. Here he is, undisputed king of late night TV. All right, so after Leno convinced the host that he was next to go up there, which he wasn't, but he convinced him he was, he gets up there and he tells this really lame joke. And what it is he's got this joke. I'll tell you what it is real quick. He says that, here I am, I just got to LA from Boston, I'm running around trying to find some work, and every 5 minutes somebody from Guam asks me how to get to Disneyland. Well, it was kind of funny for a second, but what happened is later that's a Friday night, and the next day, Saturday, I'm heading down Sunset, and I look over at the Comedy Store, Mitzi's Comedy Store, and she had that little ticket booth out there just to the right where somehow she used to get Jimmy Walker to hang around there all the time. But this morning, Jay was out there. Old Big Joe himself was out there, and there was about 15 or 16 people standing around him. And I looked over, and right when I went by, I could read his lips. He threw his hands up, and he's like, people from Guam every 5 minutes ask me how to get to Disneyland. So he tells it again. Okay, then I'm on my way home that night, and I think, I think I'll go by the Improv. Improv's a hip place, and over Melrose. I'll swing in there before I go home. So I swing in and get a parking place right across the street. Walk inside, that small building, and right there on the right, there's a stage, and right when you walk through the door, right when I walk through the door, old Big Jaw says, people from Guam ask me how to get to Disneyland. So I get hit with it again. There's 7 million people in LA. I'm just one person, and every time I turn around, Leno's hitting me with this joke. So the next morning, I'm driving down Sunset again. This time I'm going the other way. I'm going up towards Doheny to this restaurant to get some breakfast. And unbelievably, I look on the sidewalk, and there's Jay. He's got a sandwich board hanging over him. He's walking down Sunset. Those things they advertised with. He's walking along with it. He's walking down Sunset, and it says on the back of it, directions to Disneyland, $5. Dave, you remember you had that show in New York? It was just a couple months. You guys called it the Early Show. Well, I watched it a few times, not too many, but I do remember that last week watching it, and I remember the statement you made to the American public when they were going to cancel you. And what it was that you said that the network brass, the network was getting so much pressure for more soaps, they had to boot you out. Well, it worked out all right. You got back to LA, and you got the big show. You got the show right after Johnny Carson, Late Night with David Letterman. And you were out there, you had that house, no furniture. But you really exploded the whole scene, because you know, you wore that suit and them tennis shoes, and the whole public, especially all the young kids, they just followed your lead on it. And you talk about being in vogue. I mean, talk about the hippest guy in the world. All these young kids are copying you. They're wearing the suits with the tennis shoes, and it's just a thing, man, across the country. And I watched the show night after night, but you know, then I figured out really why you were wearing those tennis shoes. And what it was remember that whole set was kind of shaky, and you know, the production and the staff, and who knew what was going to happen from time to time. You know, I went to the show plenty of times. I saw what was going on between the commercials, people trying to find things, and it was really shaky. And I know what you were thinking. What you were thinking is that any moment you might feel the need to just run out of there. You'd be a lot better if you had your tennis shoes on.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Johnny.
Johnny Carson's last Friday night on the air, he didn't have any guests. He just did it himself, and he just basically sat back there for about an hour and whined is what he did. But the Friday before, which was the last Friday night with guests, I got a personal invitation from Johnny, and we're sitting there, and Ed McMahon does his normal warm-up. You know, he tells a few jokes, and the band's playing, Shaughnessy's beating the drums. And right before Carson gets announced, Ed always announced, you know, here's Johnny. This hay hacker from North Dakota is sitting beside me, leans over and he says, "Hey man, is this a rerun?" And I'm like, "You got this." So I was really courteous to the old guy and an old timer, and I explained to him how impossible it would be, even to think that was absurd. Explained it to him how, you know, this just can't be a rerun. We're sitting here live watching. And he goes, "Yeah, but how do we know that?" Johnny had a couple of known guests on that night, but I actually made the trip to see the great Letterman. You know, he had Bob Hope and Clint Eastwood. I mean, they're good company, they're good background, but Letterman was undoubtedly the headliner. It's still an anthropological mystery how Big Jaw Leno could be selected over the great and powerful Letterman to take over the Tonight Show. He wasn't even completely evolved yet. That's how he got the big nickname, Big Jaw. He wasn't. Now, there's a rumor out there that you're going to retire soon. Well, the problem with that is there's no one to take your place. You know, we got the Jimmys, and you know, Jimmy Fallon, he's good. He'll get down the road a piece. And you got that Sethy guy, and then Conan, he's still hanging around. I mean, what's a Conan? Anyway, none of these people in your league. Then there's another rumor out there that Colbert's going to take your place. Now, he's a talented comedian, but I mean, he can't take your place. He's not in your league. You know, these people I mentioned above, they've all just been following your lead all this time. Think about it. You have nothing to do if you're retired. What are you going to do? Go back to your old-fashioned bag of groceries at the Atlas grocery store? You know, there's just nothing out there. You know, you pick Harry up at the bus stop every day. You pick him up. You go back to the house. You're sitting out there in your lawn chair with them big old funny-looking glasses and that hat and your cigar, and Harry's cruising around with his spinning bike, and then pretty soon it stalls. So, you know, you have to walk over there, and he's cranking and cranking and cranking on it. And so you take a big old hit off that cigar, big old hit, and you look down at it and just kind of really analyze it, long and hard look, and you say, "Harry, it's got to be the carburetor." If you decide to retire and you follow through with this, there's going to be tremendous outcry over the whole matter. It's funny because when Big Jaw retired, nobody even said anything. But I suggest you rethink it. Get a hold of Munvez and Tasty over there at CBS. Tell them you'll give them a sweet deal. Negotiate something through 2016, at least until this presidential race is over. You know, you can just coast. You don't need 20-some-odd writers. Trust me, the candidates will give you plenty of material to follow through. You can just phone it in, man. You remember that guy, Anthony Peter? I think it might have been Anthony Weiner. He was the congressman up there in New York. And he had to resign because his internet content was so poor. He got caught sending these sexually explicit pictures out on the text all the time, so he had to resign. So then it wasn't too long after that, it was only about a year and a half, he decided he was ready to go again. So he starts running for mayor of New York City. And he's under the direction of Danny Kindom. Thank God it's not Danny Condom, because you got Anthony Weiner and his campaign manager Danny Condom, and I mean how bad can it get? And the question is, on your focus, you're trying to impress the voters to get confidence in you to win the election so you can represent. And how far off focus are you really? How far off track are you when you're doing this type of activity? You see what I'm saying, Dave, about these politicians? You see what I'm saying? You got the good old mayor of Canada. He's Rob Ford. He's doing crack and freebasing and slamming down beers. And, it's bad enough that he's doing all that, but then he gets caught twice on video doing it. So he comes clean, and he calls it, how gracious of him, he comes clean, he calls a press conference, and he tells the public, his people, he says, don't worry about it. It probably won't happen again because I was drunk. Well, down here in South Florida, you tell the judge, you use that for an excuse, you tell the judge you were drunk, he's going to give you another charge. Back to these politicians. You remember back a couple years before Al Gore invented the internet, there was a presidential race going on. You had Bush 41, you had Loverboy Clinton, and you had that independent guy. What's his name? The guy with the big ears and all the cash. Ross Perot. So they were running, and what I remember the most about the whole thing is that during these debates, they kept interrupting Perot. And he kept saying, can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish? And it's just absurd. That's what I remember the most about the whole election. You got Chris Christie. He's going to run for president. It takes 4 bags of burgers just to keep him moving. And then you got that law that's been on the books forever where you can only weigh so many hundreds and hundreds of pounds and still be eligible to be president. Then there's this other character, Ted Cruz. I really don't know what they're thinking. They got their think tank, they got their finances, they got their whole campaign going. But there's a bottom line. And the bottom line is, nobody named Ted Cruz is ever going to be president of the United States. That's the name for a movie star. It's a stage name is what it is for a movie star, or for the next big hip-hop artist. I don't know what they're thinking. They got to be kidding. It's ridiculous. Well, David, you've come full circle. There you sit on your throne, the undisputed king of late night TV. You're in the same theater that you started out, the Ed Sullivan Theater, when back in the day there was only 3 superstar entities. The Beatles, Elvis, and then the superstar of all superstars, the great David Letterman. I remember all the women, all the young girls. It was completely insane. Complete hysteria. They're throwing their clothes at you. They're screaming, they're crying. You had to have 3 limousines at each job, 2 David Letterman doubles, just to curtail the crazed crowd so you could get in and out of jobs. It was just absolutely crazy. It was a monumental night in entertainment history. That magic night when you finished your performance and Ed Sullivan put his arm around you, and he took you in, and he said, Letterman is not that arrogant snippet, vulgar trash mouth that some people have put him out to be, and said he could possibly be a bad influence on the youth of America. Ed Sullivan said, quote, "This is a real fine, decent boy. We never had a better experience with a guest on our show. He is thoroughly all right." But later, when the network brass got a hold of it, they only showed it from the waist down. From the waist down. Yeah.